Councilor Cannon. I take critical feedback well. And you're one to always offer it, so I appreciate that.
No, respectfully, Dr. Tremblay,
I got to turn.
I know, but you're respectfully, you've gone out of your way. You've gone out of your way. I've gone out of my way to commend you publicly and privately over the years. We have a relationship in this body between the school committee and school leadership where sometimes we need to have candid conversations. And if this was solved behind the scenes without public discourse, that's an ideal situation. I'm tired of getting the calls from parents whose kids don't feel safe. So now's not the time for jokes and me making, this is important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Bryant.
Point of order is that this is not the time for you to tell a guest.
Let him speak.
How they should behave, and this is not time for jokes. We've got limited time, so
we will take all the time we need, Ms. Bryant, to ensure the safety of our kids.
But you're clouding it with a lot of, some might say condemnation or whatever. You're making good points, but just let's not get into.
I appreciate the
Councilor
Bryant. I am doing my best to harness the anger that I have that this is allowing to be continued in our schools at the expense and risk of our children, parents, and staff.
Okay.
So thank you. I'll try to do
point of information was made. It's responded to. Dr. Tremblay, you have the floor. And let's everybody, we all get our chances to speak, and let's not interrupt the speakers.
So thank you for the questions and the feedback. What I think should happen, I think what's created some confusion is we've created the city council agenda item because there's genuine concern, and no one disputes that. The school committee has a very distinct function of 3 responsibilities, as you know: budget, policy, and me, the superintendent of schools. So what's happened is we've created this bifurcated approach where matters of concern in schools are now coming before the city council and the school committee. And so my response to the city council was to make myself, I have never denied anybody a meeting, and you know that. And everybody here knows that, because I've met with many of you as you were onboarding or at some point. And I always make myself available. That's not to have a clandestine meeting that we don't open up to the public. So I appreciate the raising the point and having the public discussion. Great. What I would recommend and suggest, if I may be so bold, is that if a constituent reaches out to you as a city councilor on a matter involving the public schools, reach out to me and engage me in the conversation, and I will gladly meet with you and your constituent. Engage the school committee chair, who would gladly join me and any of you and the family to try to bring some, because we are all in this together to try to make this work for our kids and our families. We share in that, even if we may disagree on approach or perceptions or ideas that things are being swept under the carpet or people are, or whatever. There are legal guidelines that I have to follow. Yes, schools, you mentioned about schools having the responsibility. They do. Education Reform Act of 1993 squarely put the responsibility of school leadership on the school principals. That's not a delegation, so things are communicated to me, and there's been gaps, and we're going to address those gaps. But then when I get the information, it's my job then to provide a blanket email to the entire city of Framingham on an issue that happened on a school bus. It's important that the families involved know, and as I mentioned before, I think it's important that we widen the audience a bit so that we can have more commitment from everybody involved. Again, the perception will be, if we do this, that there's constantly a state of chaos. Because I will tell you, there's badly behaved situations that happen every day in school. And if you think that I can somehow prevent that, as though I could prevent anything for behaviors that happen, look at the adult world and the behaviors that you see around it. We have a lot of poor role models in the world right now. So we have a real problem, and it's not one that I'm going to fix as superintendent in 6 hours through an email, but it's one that I'm committed to working on with the community. I'm open to every suggestion as to how I can do my job better and in service to our students. I don't take that feedback critically. I take it as feedback so I can make it better as a steward of this community that I care deeply about, by the way. So I would encourage you to be responsive to a number of the points that you've made, but the distilling point here to be made by me is that if you are confronted with a matter that falls squarely in the school department's responsibility, please engage the school department in the discussion. I would be happy to attend any meeting, and feel free, if you're not comfortable with my leadership or you lack confidence in my ability to resolve that problem, engage the chair or any member of the school committee behind me.
One quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman. What steps were taken following our meeting in February and in the months before the end of the year what results have been. I guess, how do we feel better about going into a new school year where the community can hopefully say and believe that violence is not tolerated in our schools? Because that's not where we are now.
No, and I guess the question is violence not tolerated in our schools? Can we have a zero tolerance policy? The answer is no. That's not to say that we condone it or that we accept it or that it's okay, but there are limitations on what we can and cannot do. And so we have to often work around by creating safety plans that don't just dismiss kids out of hand to say, you had a bad behavior moment, a zero tolerance policy says you can't come back. That's an expulsion from school. So we have to work within the confines, and the point you raised earlier, Mr. Cannon, Councilor Cannon, about, we certainly have a great and very invested delegation. There are some changes that may be coming up on the suspension law, and I'll certainly loop in our delegation if I feel there's a space in there where we can have something proactive. And I think that's a very good point that you raised as well. But I'm not sure what response you were waiting for from me. I apologize if I didn't provide that, but I will tell you that following our meeting in February, at the same time, we were just about appointing a new principal there. As I mentioned earlier, we've relocated a program where a number of the issues that we were dealing with last year had manifested. We've relocated that program with permission as opposed to asking for forgiveness later from the department. What we don't want to do is move students and programs and then have to move them back where they were because we violated some sort of law or policy. So that is a step we've taken. We are moving as a district to go in-house busing. It's a project, as you know, the school committee voted that. We think that if we can get to a point where we make it attractive, the problems that are happening on buses, we have more buses. Therefore, we have less students jammed up three to a row. So you give more personal space. You have less encroachment upon that personal space. We can look at additional steps with monitors, although we do have some. We have about 15 monitors that we have now. We can certainly employ more monitors if needed. But also, we can use our existing staff so it doesn't come at a cost. A principal just today reached out to me with a suggestion on we could have some of our available staff do a check-in. Because some of the problems that happen on our buses were students that didn't even belong on the bus in the first place. So how did they get on that bus? Who was watching that? Why did that happen? And that could have been averted had that child or that student not gotten on that bus in the first place. So are there more proactive measures we can take? I think that's where I want to be. We can only go back in time and correct what's happened, but I agree with your points. Going forward, how do we restore confidence and give assurances that schools are safe? Schools are safe places. In fact, it's some of the most safe places you can be in a school community or any community. But there are behaviors that happen that are unsafe. And how do we get ahead of those? And I think that's where we need to enlist more people than just me and you. We need families to also do their part. And I'm not sure we do a great job, frankly, as a school department, of letting our families know all the things that we need them to do to come in to be partners with us. And I think that's the area where we can see some improvement. And that's work that we're already doing for next year. So
I appreciate the candid conversation. And
I do too. Thank you. And
I'm hopeful that when we do this conversation, I'm guessing sometime in the fall, will you join us then? Or I'm extending the invitation now. Are you willing to come back and make that commitment? We'll schedule it when it makes sense.
I'll let the chair.
My question is to you, Dr. Tremblay.
Well, I'll defer to the chair in just a moment after my comment. But so the answer is yes, but it should be a conversation that's jointly held with the school committee. To have this is creating, well, number one, I don't necessarily, and love the idea of 20 bosses.
I don't disagree with you. So let's agree to part ways here, because we have other questions and it's a long night.